Hey, good morning and welcome to Church 180. We're glad to have you with us this morning. We hope you had a great holiday season. We hope that all your dreams came true at Christmas, so to speak, and that as you look forward into the new year, that the Lord is opening up new possibilities for you. We hope that your time, maybe away, if you had a vacation period, or your time with family or friends was an inspiration to you and a time to reflect on all that God has done in your life and maybe what He's going to do in the coming year. So we're glad to have you with us. We're going to be looking this morning at the prophet Isaiah, what he wrote. And so I invite you, if you have a Bible, you can access it on your device to open up Isaiah. In particular, we're going to look at chapter 60. So welcome again. Glad to have you with us. Isaiah 60 at the beginning. So we talked about, it's been a while, back before Christmas, we talked about the hope of Jesus. We talked about preparing for Christmas, getting ready for Christmas. But we also, if you remember, this past December, we were talking about Advent from the standpoint of not just waiting to celebrate the birth of Jesus, the coming of Jesus, which we do, but also His return. What does it mean as Christians to be waiting on Jesus to come back and getting prepared for that? And we looked at the prophet Isaiah because among the other prophecies, he was communicating to God's people at that time that God would send a Messiah. God would send a Savior. God would send hope. God would send help for them to be able to succeed in being who He called them to be, even though they weren't doing so well at that. They had not done well over the hundreds of years. And so, you know, when you get to parts of the Old Testament, you really begin to get a sense of the desperation of people. And you may remember we talked about King Ahaz, and he was kind of desperate because there was an army. There were actually two armies of people coming against him. They were threatening him. And, you know, the Lord told him, don't worry about it. In Isaiah 7, 8, 9, in that area, God was saying, hey, trust in me. I will take care of you. But like a lot of us, it really threatened him. It really got to him. And instead of just trusting the Lord, he looked elsewhere. You know, he looked to the king of Assyria, who would turn out to be really bad news, but that's where he looked, thinking, hey, if I can get him to take care of these other two armies, these countries that are threatening me, I'll be okay. And you know how that worked out. Assyria came down, and not only did they take care of those two countries eventually, they also took care of King Ahaz and the southern kingdom, so to speak. So this morning I want to pick back up in a sense with Isaiah, but we're going to fast forward. And in fast forwarding, I want to ask you now, jump back into your life here and now. A totally different, seemingly, question. Think about just the way sometimes people talk about getting a new insight. You ever heard somebody say, man, I had an epiphany about whatever? You ever heard that? What did they mean? What did they mean? I had an epiphany. Stumped all the way around. We've heard it, but we don't know exactly.
It's a descriptor. English majors probably know. It's an adjective.
Sure.
But it means that I see something completely different than I've ever seen it before. And I went, oh my goodness.
Exactly.
I didn't see it that way before.
Yeah. I mean, you could describe it in different ways. One of the ways that maybe you think more of is, you know, a light bulb came on. Oh. Duh. Exactly. You know, and I mean, there is the sense in which maybe it's something complex. Maybe it's some scientific thing that you're researching and you're like, I've never understood it that way before. But maybe it's just something simple. Maybe it's just something that you just haven't grasped. And you're like, oh, something dawns on you. And you think, that's what that means, or that's what that is, or this is how I should approach this problem. Well, that's obviously an epiphany, and that's one use of it. We as Christians use the word epiphany in a similar fashion, but with different meaning. Well, it's related meaning. And that is that when we talk about the Epiphany, we're speaking of the Epiphany of God involving Jesus. And that Epiphany that we celebrated this past Monday, that was Epiphany, January 6th, it is the idea of Jesus coming and not just being born to the Jews, but then being presented to the rest of the world. And the way we tend to think of that in church, some churches, not all, but some churches celebrate the Three Kings Day. I think of the Hispanic community. You know, many of them. Say it again?
100%.
Yeah, it's that we celebrate Three Kings Day. Other people talk about the Magi coming. You know, it's the idea of people coming from other parts of the world, kings, scholars, astrologers, coming because they had some sense, heightened by the appearance of a star, that drew them to Bethlehem, drew them to meet this coming Messiah, this one who was supposed to be a king of the world. And so they made this voyage. And we celebrate that because, again, for those of us who have been Christians or studied it, we know that initially God sent Jesus to send out the message. His Messiah had come to God's people, the Jews, but for the purpose of sharing that to the whole world. Now, I want to tie that in, as you may remember, to the whole purpose of Israel being selected in the first place. You remember that God didn't choose the Jews. He didn't choose the Israelites to be his chosen people because there was something special about them. He chose them so that he could relate to them in a way that would help the rest of the world see who he is and understanding how they might follow him. Okay, so what does all this have to do with the prophecy of Isaiah? And in particular, for us today, what does it have to do with having an epiphany, having new insight? If you follow along the story that Isaiah is telling us, you see that, yes, they were told that a Messiah was coming. Yes, he would be unlike all the previous governments that they had had. And you may remember the names we celebrated Christmas. You know, in Isaiah 9, he's called what? Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Yeah, and we talked about Prince of Peace in particular. Because in his way of governing, it was going to be different than the way all the other governments of the nations around them had governed. There was going to be peace. Not forced peace, but peace because of his love, peace because of his grace, peace because of the way in which he called people to interact with each other. A very different way than most of us tend to react. We want to look at that this morning because what you see as you follow this story along is that Israel did a lot of what we do. When life got really difficult, they panicked. When somebody came against them, they bowed up, if you will, to fight back. They over and over tended to forget who they were, and they tended to forget the resource that they had in God. They tended to stray away from that. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not immune to that myself. You know, I mean, when I get into trouble, thankfully, I've not had anybody come against me, you know, physically to try to just hurt me or destroy me. But when I get in a jam, when I get in a real struggle, it's you know, you begin to feel all that uneasiness. Sometimes you panic depending on what the consequences could be. And you have to dig deep. You have to step back and breathe and remind yourself, at least I do, wait a minute. Remember the God that is my God. Remember the promises that he gave me to be with me always. Remember the strength that he makes available to me because I belong to him and because he's poured out his Spirit into me. That's a different way of addressing problems than we tend to do as a people. The Israelites knew that. They had been told over and over, and yet they still did what many of us do today. The epiphany came along as God began to tell them through the prophet Isaiah, I'm going to send someone who is going to open up a new way for you. I'm going to send someone who's going to give you new insight. I'm going to send someone who will be successful in fulfilling all of what I've called you to do that you haven't been able to accomplish. To be faithful, to be obedient. So we pick that up in the book of Isaiah today in chapter 60, where Isaiah says to the people of Israel, arise, shine, for your light has come. Now, what does it mean when he says shine? What's he talking about? Arise, shine. Why would he just say something to the people of Israel? He's a prophet. He's a prophet of God. Why would he call the people? Why might God be saying to us today, arise, shine, for your light has come? What causes us to shine? Anybody have any idea? Light. Yeah. Light inside us. Light reflected off of us. Well, most of us aren't carrying around some kind of battery-operated light, right? But if you've ever been around somebody who is remarkably at peace when everybody else is kind of anxious, if you've ever been around somebody who just seems to be joyful, even when you know their life isn't really going very well, you might say, one way of saying it, I don't know if many of us say it today, but one way of describing that might be to say, man, there's something about you that just looks different. You just don't look the same. There's something, there's kind of a, I don't know, man, there's a glow about you. What do you know? Who have you been with? What have you found out? What Isaiah the prophet is saying to the people of Israel is, remember who you are. Remember the promise that God has given. I won't go into all of it today, but I would encourage you, if you want to study this a little bit deeper, to look particularly at chapter 55 up through 60. Because you begin to hear things like, come, beginning of 55, come all who are thirsty. Come to the waters, and you who have no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost. He's addressing a people who had need. He's addressing a people who had some sort of struggle. And he's inviting them to come. And then he goes on, if you skip down a little bit, he says, listen. Listen to me and eat what is good, and you'll delight in the riches of fare. In other words, eating is a metaphor for the sense of taking in what I have for you. Listen to what I have to say and take it in. Count on it. Trust in it. Now, you know as well as I do that we can read the promises of God, and we can say, that's great. I'm excited about that. Man, I hope that's going to happen. But how many times, again, do we struggle with things in our real lives, and when we're struggling with them, we're not thinking about the promises of God. We're not thinking about the reality that God has come in the Messiah, and that we may cry out, Lord, help me. Or we may just pray, God, I'm really struggling. Help me get through this. Give me insight. Help me see whatever I'm facing in a way I haven't seen, because I'm not coming up with an answer. I don't know how to deal with this. And in this passage, the prophet is saying in words of that culture that would say, hey, listen to what I've told you and take it in. Believe it. Make it yours. Now, he doesn't just leave you with that. He goes on in verse 8 to say, for my thoughts are not your ways. Neither are your ways my ways. So he's acknowledging, hey, I think in ways that you don't always think. And I make possible what isn't possible according to your way. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. As the rain and snow come down from heaven, and does not return to it without watering the earth, making it bud and flourish, and all the plants and trees grow, and so is my word that goes out from my mouth. It will not return to be empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it. Again, he's saying in words that maybe are a little strange to us, you don't think the way I think. You can't see the way I see. You don't know what I know. But if you'll trust me, if you'll trust that even though my ways don't look like what you would expect, and even though my thoughts maybe don't line up with what you would have thought, I've sent you my word to explain to you how to go about your life. We've talked a lot over the last several years about the importance of knowing God's word and the importance of applying it, the importance of realizing that what God tells us is actually for help for us, for our own good. And that's what he means when he says, my word won't go out and return empty. If you'll let it, if you'll listen to the words of God, if you'll take them in, if you'll study them, they'll change the way you think. They'll help you believe what you struggle to believe, and that is God will help you be who he's called you to be. Now, again, you might say, well, okay, so then the people who have received God's word, all their troubles go away. Nope. Maybe you'll say, well, the troubles don't go away, but they're always at peace. Nope. Maybe you'd say, well, they may not always be at peace, but at least they trust him because they know that if they'll just follow his way, if we'll just follow his teachings, if we'll just do what we're supposed to do, stuff will work out all right. Nope. For one, sometimes when we follow his ways, stuff doesn't work out. For another, how many of us stumble? How many of us struggle with, I know I should have done this and I didn't. I know I shouldn't have done that, but I did. And now I'm stuck. Now I'm dealing with whatever has happened. So how is it that his word doesn't return to him without having an effect? This is the blessing that we celebrate in Epiphany. Let me connect that for you. The Messiah has come. We celebrated that at Christmas. And in Jesus' coming, he taught us different ways of living than we tend to naturally think of living. He taught us that it's about trusting God because of what God does, not just because of what we can do. God's grace comes and makes ways for us that we couldn't pull off. God's grace comes when we have stumbled. If we go back to him and ask for forgiveness, and he forgives us. And his grace often comes in ways we never expected, simply because of his goodness and his promise to be with his people. So when we see Jesus come, and we see this strange event where, regardless of whether they were kings or scholars or whoever they were, these wise men, when we see them coming from other parts of the world, it might cause us to wonder what it is that made them believe. What is it that would make them go on such a journey to find this little baby? They had studied his word. They had some indication that something amazing had just happened. And they needed to go check it out. Now, I don't know what you've had amazing happen in your life. But think about something being so amazing that you would leave your home at great expense and travel a long way away to find whatever it is. Imagine having a sense about you that if I will go and find what I'm seeking, if I will go and find whatever it is I'm being led to, if I will search for Jesus, I'll find him. God will reveal himself to me. No matter where I've been, no matter what I'm in the midst of, no matter what I'm facing. And somehow in meeting him, somehow in coming to him and saying, you are what I've been looking for. And I will choose to follow you. I will choose to listen to you. I will choose to let you instruct my life. And I will trust that you will bring me into better days. That you will help me. You may not solve the immediate problem in front of me. I may still have to go through some yuck. But you will bring me into a way of living that I've never known before. And I can trust you. Would that be worth seeking? Well, if you've never really struggled, maybe not. If you've never really had a heartbreaking event happen in your life, if you've never suffered a profound loss, if you've never felt really, truly alone, rejected, not accepted, if you've never been in a place where you had absolutely no idea what to do going forward, then this may not be a message that's any helpful to you. But if you have, or you're wise enough to realize that maybe I haven't, but I'm probably going to in the future, then maybe you ought to consider Jesus. And maybe those of us who do know him, maybe we ought to reconsider him. Maybe we ought to pay attention to what God said about Jesus and what Jesus said about God. Maybe we ought to listen to him when he says, the prophet Isaiah, through the prophet Isaiah, arise, shine, for your light has come and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. In other words, all of the goodness of God has risen among you. See, darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness is over the peoples. What he's talking about there is our tendency to just get lost. Our tendency to look in other directions for solutions to our problems. I'm going to take a step back just for a minute and tell you that just in the past few weeks, I've had conversations with people that I know personally that are still living in real darkness. They are confident because they happen to be really smart people, really intelligent people, really well-educated, gifted people. They are confident that no matter what they face, they can overcome it because they're smart enough to do that. They're strong enough to do it. They're determined enough to do it. And they're really smart people. And they're really strong-willed people. And they've accomplished a significant amount in life. And they're facing something right now that they can't get over. They can't get past it. And in one case in particular, it is literally killing them. That's living in the land of darkness. Because they absolutely refuse to let go of control. They absolutely refuse to allow the reality in their life that God may have a better way than they do. They simply can't let go of the fact that they're not going to be able to smart their way through this. They're not going to be able to, by sheer determination, overcome this challenge. They're in fact not going to be able to survive. Now, you and I both know none of us are going to survive forever. We're all going to die eventually. But it's one thing to die with the hope and confidence that Jesus is with you. And he'll always be with you. And another, to not have let him have control. Not to have allowed him to become Lord. Living in a land of darkness. Isaiah is calling the people of Judah to let that light shine. Let the truth of who God is and their knowledge of him, their experience with him, the good of who they have discovered him to be. Let that light shine. Now that won't occur until they meet Jesus. Verse 3 says something kind of astounding when you're thinking about this way. If you can imagine, because I don't think any of you right now, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think any of you currently sitting around me are in such dire straits right now that if something radical doesn't happen, you may not be with us in a few weeks. But if you can imagine being in that place, or being up against some challenge that is, and you don't have an answer, you don't know how to get past it. Imagine being told, yeah, but even in the midst of it, let other people see that God, the God of Jesus Christ, the Lord, is your authority. He is the one who determines how you live and you put your trust in. Even though you can't see the way forward and you can't guarantee that he's listening. I mean, he is, but you can't guarantee that by showing you've already overcome. Let your light shine. I bring that up because even though we're not maybe in that place, we all have struggles. We all have things in which we need to trust God. We all have situations that are beyond our control. How is anybody else that's in a similar position, going to get any hope from you unless they see you hope in a different way, trust in a different person, be willing to not control your life and allow God to have the final word. Allow God to be the one who instructs you. Allow God to be the one that you turn to and you ask for help. And even when it goes against what you may think needs to happen, even when it goes against what everybody around you is doing, even when it goes against maybe the the advice everybody else you know is giving you. You listen to the word of the Lord through reading His word, through prayer, ultimately through trusting Him. For them to see, wow, He must be somebody different for you to hang on to like that. Verse 3 says, nations will come to your light. Kings, in other words, great leaders of power and might and wisdom and wealth, will come to the brightness of your dawn. In other words, your life will so stand out because of the hope you have and the peace you have in the midst of a bunch of really lousy situations. They'll see something in you that is really different. And most of us, when we find something like that, we go check it out. Because we want it. We want that in our lives. It's like a light bulb went off. Oh, he has something that I don't have. Not he being one of us guys. He being the Lord. Oh, God sent him to help me through what I'm dealing with. That's the prophecy of Isaiah in chapter 60. That's the prophecy that Isaiah was trying really hard to get his own people to hear. That's the prophecy that he was saying in a difficult time. Probably sounded kind of weird. Maybe sounded like a broken record. Maybe sounded like somebody who wasn't in touch. But nevertheless, that's what he believed because that's what God had given him to say. And he was willing to say it. Maybe it's worth listening to. You know, a lot of people, as we passed New Year's, a lot of people made resolutions. You know, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do it differently this time. I didn't get it done last year. I'll do it this year. If we listen to the words of Isaiah and the prophecy and the call to not only accept the Lord, but to surrender control of our lives to Him and to trust Him, instead of a New Year's resolution, maybe we just have a new view that allows us to listen to what He wants and says we're going to do instead of what we decide.